Hello, my name is Nancy Helmeckman. My experience going through my PhD program, my degree at the University of Arizona, was in biliteracy, education and reading. Biliteracy means establishing two languages, American Sign Language and ASL. That was my emphasis. But it could be other languages, could be Spanish and English or French and Spanish. And the point of my study was focusing on how people learn two languages at the same time. It's a large discussion right now that needed to be studied, and there's many different points of view. But at the same time, it was important to learn how younger children learn from parents who switch between both languages. Like, for example, Spanish, we don't have a lot of research on that, so they use the word language, which is very powerful, but the meat of this, what are they tying to their own language as opposed to other languages? I'm missing what she's fingerspelling. There's a lot of different languages that I can think of, going back to what language means for deaf children. Biliteracy means having access to both American Sign Language and English. It's not just reading. It's being able to listen, to read, and everything. Now, it depends on the child. Some of the children have skills to learn to speak, and that's great. If not, then that's okay. It doesn't matter. But the point is still that you learn English to read and write English, so they can have equal respect, equal opportunity as hearing children. So we introduced the concept to the schools nationwide. In this concept of SIMCOM. SIMCOM is a mode of communication, and it's called fragmented language because you're mixing. It's confusing for a person. They get lost. Many people say that I'm skilled. I can SIMCOM. I can sign and speak at the same time. But most of the time, the ASL gets fragmented, and people depend on their English because that's what they're used to. So ASL, the grammar structure of ASL is not the same as English. So, for example, ASL starts with time, the concept of time first. Then you go on with that. But in English, you don't have to put time first. You can put time anywhere in the sentence. So the English is one of the most complicated languages to learn in the world. So when you put them both together, it's more fascinating, more interesting, and more challenging. And harder for the families too, because it's hard for older people to learn. People who learn ASL later in life, it's more difficult for them. Anyways, to have access to both languages is very important. So when we back up to ASL and English, we don't want to use SIMCOM. We need to emphasize on a language plan. Who is responsible? It's got to be a team effort. It's not just the parents. It's the parents, the school, the teachers, the administrators. Everybody you got to follow the rules. Like, for example, you go to recess time, you go to the playground, or lunchtime, when there's signing or speaking going on, children who are deaf, they'll sign. But when they get back to the classroom, there's the kids should be exposed to signing pictures on the wall and things like that. Like Facebook and Twitter and things like that, it's really important to include. TV captionings is important to include. You need to see the connection, the relationship. One of my favorite stories, I always use this story, and I've used it for a long time when I work with teachers and talking with them about language issues. One point is, I focused on closed captions in schools, is what I focused my research on, and vocabulary development. So I did a pre and post test, and I had them watching TV shows for 30 minutes at their reading level, at a 6th grade reading level, 5th, 6th grade. And then the same shows, I did a pre-test of 10 words. And what did they mean? There was no guidance or anything, just tell me what you think these words mean. Then after they watched the show, I did a post-test with the same words to see if any of the words they were able to capture and understand. And they did increase in their ability to understand those words. So that was one part. The other part is I interviewed students. After every movie, we had a class discussion. Before the interview, what did you think of the story? And there was the word, what words challenged you? And so we'd have some discussion about that. One student raised their hand. What does it mean to be backstabbing? What does that mean? And I said, interesting, that was really surprising to me, because the 7th grade students, they use the sign often, but they don't see the connection between the sign and the English word. So I wrote the word. Then I said, backstabbing, that's fine. I go, what do you think this means? Let's talk about this. What's the sign for that word? And a person said, backstabbing on the other person. I go, what's the sign for that? And they thought about it for a while, and I said, no answer? Okay. I go, this is the sign. And then they all had this funny expression like, no. And they were shocked. And they were surprised at themselves, because they use the sign all the time, especially in middle school, because, they get these little arguments. And I go, and they go, so that's the English word for that sign? So my point is that deaf children need to have access to both languages to facilitate. We need to facilitate teachers and parents to do wordplay, to develop building confidence in them. ASL and English on their own is not important, but it's important to guide them, to support them, to expose them, and to instruct them. And to look at the hearing students who have taken formal English classes. It's required, but where are the ASL classes for deaf students? That's important. So that gives you something to think about. We need to talk more about this and have good dialogue about this in our communities. It's great for the future for our children to be exposed to what school actually looks like. You have a question?
In the classroom, you teach 50% English and 50% ASL. How does that work?
Well, how that looks is it's all involved in the language plan. You establish a chart and give equal language an equal amount of time. As soon as deaf children arrive to school, they have limited access to ASL and to English too. So if for example, if families don't sign until much later in life, so we do a lot of social ASL, and then academic ASL, and then reading English and writing English. So that's a lot. And with kindergartners, it's more focused on social ASL, American Sign Language. And as they get older, there's less time on the social aspect of it. So over time, it kind of balances out. But English, you progressively get more challenging with English. So, because we want them to use ASL out of the classroom to be able to switch back and forth, but that doesn't happen inside of them. They got to know where to stop. Children will know in the classroom, they start with ASL and they're communicating and talking, and then they have exposures to word, and some use classifiers to introduce concepts. There's a game like, this is an A. This is an A. That you can use this A for the sign girl or for tomorrow. So there's different signs you can use with the hand shape A. And then you use the English to expose them to that. So it's not a 50-50 thing. It's more like, it may be, 80-20, and then it gradually changes. When you're teaching ASL, sometimes you're writing on a board in English. It's always there. You can do that. You can sign and you can connect the words to the English, but and for those who really benefit from speaking, I missed that. I think she said allocated equal amounts of time. One deaf student. Wow. Spoken English in ASL is interesting. Some professors get upset. Some teachers get upset. I'm like, no, it's my parents. Really, they don't have enough knowledge or understanding to let them go ahead. They want to speak, so I've got to be the same. I've got to speak, and okay, and that's fine. But when you speak English and you go back and forth, it's not 100%. It's ASL only, because it's got to be fair to them who can't benefit anything from spoken English. So the stories and the signs, wow, this is awful.